Okay, thank you for tuning back in. We're now up to part three of the three horsemen that basically began the decline of the American Republic. Part three is a tough story to tell because it sounds so bizarre. So, in the book, I actually quoted Supreme Court cases and history books rather than even speculating because it just sounds unbelievable. Here's what happened. There was a merger, the biggest monopoly ever created in history of that time, where a a Pittsburgh lawyer, Philander C. Knox. Philander, what a name. Mama must have loved him. Anyway, he was the attorney for Carnegie and J.P. Morgan and the big boys, the cabal, and he helped them put together and get through the biggest monopoly in history. It was the merger of Carnegie Steel, Federal Steel, National Tube, 17 of the biggest companies. Anybody that could make anything bigger than a nail in a home shop, they pretty much put in this monopoly. Then they sent Philander Knox to become Attorney General under McKinley so that he could manage the antitrust and monopoly unit under Theodore Roosevelt later. And of course, the biggest monopoly in the world, he never took a look at because he was the lawyer that put it together. Now, he then became Secretary of State when the cabal pushed through the third horseman, which is the 16th Amendment. Now, the 16th Amendment was also patently unconstitutional because if you read in your Constitution, which you should have by now, I hope you do, it says, no capitation or other direct tax shall be laid unless in proportion to the census or enumeration herein before directed to be taken. All right, so that means that you cannot have an income tax. Now, if the country couldn't afford to pay its bills or protect itself or whatever, an equal tax could be laid on everybody based on the census in their state, their nation state, let's keep that in mind, and then proportionally that would be allocated. That's the only tax on a person that you could have. So they had to kickstop that out. Why? Because the cabal not only wanted to print this free currency so they could bloat government and pay for wars and become richer and richer, they wanted to be paid to do it. And they wanted to make sure that this struggling nation, once they hamstrung it, could pay them their 7 or 8% that they got for printing worthless currency. So they said, aha, we need a tax where we can at any time dip in the pockets of we the people and steal their money. Again, the 25 newspapers were used to promote it. All of these three things happened within weeks and months of each other. It was incredible at the speed they used once they could control public opinion, which they haven't stopped doing yet, by the way. It happens right now. If you turn on your TV, doesn't matter which station, one of the 6 companies that control 90% of the U.S. news will tell you what to think. All right, so this is the worst thing that happened. And it sounds so unbelievable when I tell you the story because this law never did pass. In fact, that's why they call it the law that never was. Philander C. Knox, though, as Secretary of State, claims it did. Now, only 4 states properly ratified the 16th Amendment, though it took 36 to get a quorum and required to pass any constitutional amendment. That just sounded too bizarre when I first started. So I went back and looked at all the Supreme Court cases, because I said somebody would have to have challenged this. All right, listen to this. U.S. versus Thomas. This is a U.S. Supreme Court case. 16th Amendment is effective legal document even though only 4 states ratified its language exactly as Congress approved it, which is a requirement. You can't have a period out of place. It's got to be exactly stated, and then the legislature of the nation states have to vote on it and approve of it, and back then it required 36 of them to do it. So how did they get around it? The court said, okay, even though only 4 states properly ratified it, enrolled bill rule, providing that if legislative document is authenticated in regular form by appropriate official, their man Philander C. Knox, Secretary of State, that document is treated as adopted. So Philander C. Knox could say that we're dissolving the United States, and it's a properly enrolled bill because I say it is. It doesn't matter what we, the people, and our nation states said. Now, this is just absolutely bizarre. Now, to shut down all cases are ever questioning again. The last really successful one, the one that got close, was a guy named Benson. So they put him in prison. So it's United States versus Benson in 1991, and they said that any even evidentiary hearing on this question will be rejected by the U.S. courts. And then they went on to say that if you do it anymore, we're going to put you in jail. And they did put Benson in jail. All right, so that's where we are. We have an income tax that never passed. And oh, by the way, what Benson did, he and another professor went around to every state, the 36 states that supposedly ratified this law, according to Philander Knox, and got copies of the original documents and put it in this beautiful 2-volume set called The Law That Never Was. And that's what ultimately cost him his the rest of his life in prison, is that he published those books of the actual documents of the nation states, proving that what he was saying before the Supreme Court was the truth, which no longer really matters that much. So it was against the law to start with, and they wanted it so they could get paid for printing worthless money. 3 horsemen of the apocalypse, America, Republic, starts on the way down, and we are now an oligarchy controlled by the less than 1% of the richest people, not just here, but around the planet, because they control our money supply, they control our elections, they control our news media. And if you think I'm sounding conspiratorial, I'm not really. I mean, I'm quoting the Supreme Court, folks. I mean, come on, give me a break. Just read the book, The Way Back to America. It's on Amazon or at justicerestored.com. That's the end of this section. We'll go on to some other series if we have some interest in doing so, and pass it on to your friends, if you will, and get your Constitution. Get it, read it, learn it. It's a game plan. Maybe we can get back to it one of these days. See you, bye. Have a good week.